My producing partner of many years, Joe Doolittle, is our next speaker. You never quite know what Joe's going to do, as you see. He's going to share with us an historical story called After an Epiphany. And the emotion, one of the emotions in his story is high. Not high, but like a high. Joe. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe. It's nice to be here. Thanks for coming. The title of the story is really, what do you do after an epiphany? Because, you know, we probably all had things like big moments, wonder, that kind of stuff. And how do they affect you? What happens next? And this is about one of my favorite people in history, who whenever he was introduced and somebody asked him what he did, he responded that he was a beekeeper. He was a beekeeper. His name was Sir Edmund Hillary. He was knighted for one of his adventurous feats. But it didn't start out that way. His folks were a little worried about him in New Zealand because his dad was a beekeeper and he helped his dad. But any chance he got after a junior high field trip to the southern Alps of New Zealand, he wanted to go mountain climbing. And they educated him very well. And he went to college, but he got so distracted by wanting to go climbing that he dropped out and arranged for his father to hire him in the apiary, and then in the winter when the climbing was good, he'd take off and go climbing. Now, World War II interrupted his little adventures, but when that was over, he took off for the Himalayas on a British expedition. And he got there because he was one of the few people who had summited the highest peak in New Zealand. So he was beginning to get traction as a mountaineer. And he and a good buddy got tapped to do some things in 1951 in the Himalayas again. So they went back. And then in 1953, the British launched a major expedition to summit Mount Everest. And this was a big deal. They had all these native folks called Sherpas who were packing stuff up, and they kept on bringing stuff up and setting up camp, and then they'd bring up camp. And during that time, Hillary stood out because he didn't seem to get tired. He could lug, he could direct, and he maintained a great attitude. He was pleasant to be around. And he told stories at night around dinner. Began to think about who might be the climbers that summited Everest. And Ed, as he was called, got on the short list. And for political reasons, because they were in Nepal, they matched him with a Sherpa named Tenzing Norgay. Tenzing Norgay was 5'5". Ed Hillary was 6'3". They made quite a couple. And did they ever? And they weren't the first two guys to go up. They were the second two guys, because the first two guys didn't make it. And in order to get it up, Hillary, since he got along with people, got some of his friends to help him make a camp at 27,000 feet. And the guys went back to camp, Tenzing and Hillary camped out. It was 30 below and 40-mile-an-hour winds. The winds died down, and in the morning, they took off. And they were feeling pretty good. And then they got around the corner. There's this huge wall, 40 feet tall. And they looked, what are we going to do with this? Hillary gets in this crack, and it just goes up kind of like that. And Tenzing follows them. And they think they're just on their way. And they were. But it was icy. So they had to chip the ice and step, and you get tired of doing this. So they'd switch off, and then all of a sudden, Hillary realized that he was looking up at Tenzing, and he had chipped his way right over the summit of Mount Everest, the highest mountain. Hadn't even noticed it. But they noticed it now, and they got together, and Hillary was kind of a proper Englishman, even though he was from New Zealand. So he takes off his glove. It's 0 degrees, and goes to shake hands with Tenzing in the British way. And Tenzing says, "Hi!" and jumped into Hillary's arms, and they hugged and they patted their backs. And they offered tokens. Tenzing to the god of the mountains. He brought some mint, some chocolate, he buried it in the snow. Hillary had a small crucifix he'd been given by a friend of his mother's. He left that on the top of the mountain. 15 minutes. It was cold. They savored the view. They went down. They met some of their friends climbing up, worried about them. And Hillary's quote was, "We knocked off the bastard." Well, they were already kind of noteworthy in Nepal. Tenzing was a famous climber. Hillary they didn't know, but there had been this partnership of a European and a Sherpa, and that was big news. And when they got to Kathmandu, they had a big party. And then they got on a plane because they'd been summoned to the court in London. And it was 1 week after Queen Elizabeth had been coronated queen. And the first person she ever made a knight was Edmund Hillary. And that was a big deal. And Tenzing was there. And there was another party. And there was another party. And finally they were on their way back to the Himalayas. And they're on this plane. And Tenzing says to Sir Ed, as he was called, "Sir Ed, what are you going to do about it?" Do about it? About all this? He took a breath. He thought for a minute. He said to Norgay, "You know, I can't help but seeing that as we climbed up and back and through all the countryside of Nepal, I don't remember seeing anything I could recognize as a school. I was concerned about the sanitary conditions. I didn't like to drink the water in the villages. And I never saw a hospital. So I think what we ought to do is we ought to work on that. We got reputations. We can help this situation." And he said something that Hillary didn't expect. He said, "How can I help you with that? I can't read or write." And Hillary said, "I never knew. You never asked, and I didn't speak about it." Hillary says, "We can fix that too." So when they got back to Kathmandu, he got back to New Zealand, they set up the Himalayan Trust. And they sent letters and notices and things to the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation and to all these things. And they literally raised millions of dollars. And that money went to work creating education schools, training teachers, putting safe water and sewer systems into villages, and created 3 hospitals, which was no mean feat in those days. Now I share this because here's a man and his friend from 2 different cultures who have an epiphany, who are literally world famous. One who for the rest of his life described himself as a beekeeper. What did they do after the epiphany? They used their good names and reputations to do great things. Now they both had other remarkable adventures. And the only one I'm going to leave you with is that in 1974, Sir Ed and Neil Armstrong By that time, Ed Hillary had been to the South Pole. He'd never been to the North Pole. And at some fundraising connection, he bumps into Armstrong, who's walked on the moon, and they said, you know, I've never been to the North Pole either. Let's go. And Hillary says, well, how are we going to get there? He says, I'll get a plane. So Neil Armstrong and Edmund Hillary flew to the North Pole, landed on a ski plane, took a couple pictures, notched their coordinates so people would believe them, got back in the plane, and flew home. Now, I share that with you only to say there are a boatload of adventures that these two guys had. What they remember most is what they did for schools and water and medical care. And yes, they taught Tenzing Norgay how to read.
Thank you, Joe, for your elevating. You said there was a high involved, so.
Well, it was a high. It was 27,200 feet. 29,200.
Yeah.
But who's counting, right?
Yeah. Well, when you're doing it a step at a time with an ice pick, maybe ice hazard. Siri Allison is going to tell us a historical story about Sybil Ludington.
Oh.
And the emotion in that is determination.
I heard somebody say, "Oh, how much I have to leave? I'm so sorry."
That's okay. But now I can report it thanks to Sandra. Or see it.
How many? I learned about Sybil Ludington because I lived near in the Mid-Hudson Valley near where she had lived. She's a heroine, a teenage heroine from the Revolutionary War. But I thought maybe people had heard more about her in the last 20 years than when I first learned her. No?
What was her name?
Sybil Ludington.
Never heard of her. I never heard of her.
I know like you said.
Well, I was afraid people knew it, and so you'd be bored. Because I think she's getting more visibility. But I told the story to classrooms of second graders. That's when I used to tell it in schools a long time ago. So now, I've been researching more, and there's so much about it. I'm trying to condense it. And so anyway, if you want to go learn about all these people, it's very interesting. But I'll start Friday, April 25th, 1777, middle of the Revolutionary War. Almost 2,000 British soldiers sail up Long Island Sound and land on the coast of Connecticut. It's raining lightly, and they begin to march inland. They go for 24 hours with a rest, and the next day, Saturday afternoon, they reach Danbury, Connecticut, where the Continental Army, this is George Washington's army, has a supply depot. And George Washington thought this was a pretty safe place to keep it. Among other things, it's surrounded by farmland, so you would think that if any enemy is approaching, you'd have time to get your defense up. They only have 150 people guarding it, but they thought that was all right. I'm going to back up now to when the British landed. No cell phones, no telegraph. Immediately, messengers go out. Some of the messengers go to the Continental officers that are in the area, and the one that you've heard of is Benedict Arnold. He's in New Haven. Some of the messengers go out to the leaders of the militia. By militia, I mean like farmers, shopkeepers, volunteers who come when the battle gets close and they help the standing army. Some of the messages go to Danbury. The British are maybe coming your way. You better move all these supplies. So these 150 men get busy moving the medicine because they figure that's the most valuable thing that's there. Well, they haven't even finished moving the medicine by Saturday afternoon when the British troops arrive and start burning everything. They burn 4,000 barrels of beef and pork, 2,000 bushels of grain, over 1,000 tents, 5,000 pairs of shoes. They burn sugar and molasses and biscuits and wine and tools and iron implement. I don't even know how they burn that, but they burned tons of supplies. Tons. That's not really tons. I don't know how to measure that, but they burned a lot. And I didn't ever read this, but it occurs to me that this is the spring of 1777. That winter is when George Washington had such a terrible time with his troops at Valley Forge. No shoes, no food, no tents. I'm thinking that if these supplies in Danbury had still been there, Valley Forge would not have been there. That's just, so they burn all these supplies, then they begin burning buildings. And the Tories being the people who support the British, they put marks on their chimneys, like, don't burn our house, we're on your side. But a lot of Danbury is starting to burn. The soldiers were supposed to burn the rum, but instead they've been drinking it. So now we have these drunken British soldiers rampaging through the town as it burns. Terrible. Well, of course, when the British got there, messengers went out to the surrounding militia, and one of those biggest militia leaders was a guy named Henry Ludington. Very interesting guy, friends with George Washington. He recruited spies and maybe worked with them. He has a military past. He knows what he's doing. He's got about 500 men under him. So he's 20 miles west. So the messenger comes about 8:30 at night. The British are burning Danbury. We need you and your men right away. And I'm picturing him there in his nightcap, you know, because he's getting ready to go to bed. They went to bed early in those days. He's there with his wife, his 8 children. Eventually he had 12 children, but who knows? His men are all at home on their farms. It's late April, it's planting season, and they're probably all going to bed too. So he said, yes, we can come, but it's going to take some time to get my men here. Well, now, how is he going to get the men there? Because he can't go round them up. He's got to stay here and plan and be ready to organize when they come. And the messenger can't go because he's just ridden 20 miles in the rain, by the way, and he doesn't know who to go get. So Sybil is the oldest child, just turned 16, and she said, I'll go. And the story varies as to whether she volunteered or her father asked her, and if she volunteered, if he objected. But there were many reasons, obviously, to object to a girl going out on the road. First, it was dark. It's been raining for days. It's going to be slippery. What if the horse slips or twists his foot? There are coyotes. There are wolves. There are roving bands of bandits. Roving gangs of bandits who some are stealing for the British, some are stealing for themselves. There are Tories. Her father was so important. There was the British had a reward out for his capture. So the Tories know who he is. They know who she is. If she's out there doing this, they want to stop her. But there's nobody else. If they look to the east, they can see the sky is red. The British are burning Danbury now. So they let her go. She gets on the horse. Some people said she went bareback. One story says she has a man's saddle. They all agree she did not have a bridle with a bit, but just a halter and a stick. A stick for the coyotes, a stick for the bandits, and a stick to ram on the farmhouse door. The British are burning Danbury. Gather your men. Because she went to the captains. She couldn't go to 400 houses. She went to the captains, and then they would get their men, and muster at Ludington. And then she was on her way to the next house. She knew how to avoid the Tory houses. Good, she was the one that was going. She went approximately 40 miles, took her all night long, came back the next morning, aching from her ride, soaked to the skin, triumphant that she had done it. And 400 men came and joined her father, and they marched off. There had been a fear that the British were coming towards them through the Hudson, which was a disaster, but no, the British decided to go back to their ships. This is Sunday morning now. They're marching off. They miss the Battle of Ridgefield, where Benedict Arnold tries to stop these British, and the famous incident there is he has his horse shot out from under him. The horse was shot, we think, 9 times, but Benedict Arnold wasn't hit. And from that battle, he gets one of these promotions that he's been wanting. he turned traitor partly because he was so mad that they didn't appreciate him and give him his promotions. And from this battle, he got one. Not as much as he wanted, but still. So that Ludington's men are still marching. They missed this battle. But the next day, Monday, they harass and badger the English as they're getting to their ships finally. They shoot at them from behind rocks and trees and such. The British, as I can understand it, get on their ships as fast as they can and leave. And they think they've had a victory because they burned all these supplies. And when you think about Yorktown, maybe they had. But they were so beleaguered by all this trouble they got in that never again in New England did they land on the coast and try to walk in. And they made the residents of Connecticut so angry that many of them had been neutral before, and now they joined up with militias and they went off to fight at Saratoga. So I think the British really unleashed a kind of fury against themselves that, you know, that undermined their victory. And I wonder if there's a lesson in there somewhere. But so I told this story to second graders. Well, when I tell in schools, I like to have kids act out the story. So I had this little stick horse, you know, like a broomstick with a horse head on it. And I had the kids ride around the room and ride up to the blackboard where there'd be another kid sleeping. And the kid would say, "The British are burning Danbury." And the kid would wake up and say, "I'm coming." And then he would get on the hobby horse and ride around the room and come back, you know, to the sleeping. "The British are burning Danbury." And it was a lot of fun. It was great. So that was the school year. So the summer comes, and I told a story at a history camp for kids at one of the historic houses out in the Hudson. And they said, "Can you come back and do, like, you know, the culminating presentation for the parents when they come to visit?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll do Sybil Ludington. That'll be good." So the day comes, and there are the parents sitting in the folding chairs, and here are the kids up front, and I tell Sybil Ludington, and it's fine. And I pull out my stick horse, and I say, "Okay, now we're going to run around the room, gallop around the room, and say, 'The British are burning Danbury.'" But I didn't know, I was new at this, these were 5th graders, and they are much too cool to gallop around the room. Hobby horse. So the first one kind of saunters coolly around the room, and he comes to the front and goes, "The British are burning Danbury." And the kid inside goes, "I'm watching Jeopardy. I'll be there when it's over." And then they take the hobby horse and they go around and twirling it, you know, "The British are burning Danbury." And I'm asleep. I can't. So it was awful. It was just really, really embarrassing because the parents are sitting here watching these kids blow the whole idea that I had. I think I stopped them before we went through all the kids. And I had some paragraph, you know, to end with about how even children can make a difference, and you never know when your time will come. And I tried to salvage it, but it was really a terrible failure. And I don't think from that day to this, I have ever told this story. And now I'm telling the story again, so with this story, for me, it is back in the saddle.
Thank you for yet another story that ends with the phrase "back in the saddle." I thought we might have a little more metaphorical, but we have had some really actual saddles. And I believe we're going to have another one because Nancy Marie Payne is going to tell us a story that includes humility called "Mounting a Clever Horse." You see why I think the saddle. Nancy.
Whenever I go on a vacation, especially if I'm going to stay someplace for a while, I always find where's the closest stable. Because I have been riding horses all my life, and I love to go to new places. I have had horse lessons, English, Western. I have had jumping lessons. I have had carriage lessons. I've taken care of my neighbor's horses when she's been away for a week. I have groomed, I have washed, I have cleaned feet, I have mucked out stables. But I never did anything over a long period of time, and I never had an experience where I owned a horse. And so there were some gaps in my horsemanship. So here I am in Maine. Now, Maine is a beautiful state. And at one time, in this area where I was staying, there had been many, many huge estates with rich people who had interconnected their lands with carriage trails. Beautifully wide trails, no stumps, no rocks, no roots, and there were stables all around that you could go on these trails. It was just beautiful. So this is where I am. I'm at a stable in Maine. I get out of my car, I meet the owner, I meet the person who was going to be my guide. Her name was Kathy. I was the first one there. Now, whenever I go riding, I try to put this energy into the universe. Don't let there be a lot of people besides me. But I can't control that. So my caveat to that is, if there are a lot of people, let them all be of the same ability. Doesn't work either all the time. In this stable, I'm the first one. There is a ride that has gone out. I see the tails of the horses when I pull up, but it's early in the morning, which is the best time to ride. And I'm ready to meet my horse, waiting for the other people to come. Now, I've got to tell you that I have a great seat, and I know this. A seat is when you get on your horse, you look like a rider. Up to that point, you're anybody off the street. And I get out of my car, I'm anybody off the street. They give you all of the repertoire that they give to anybody. But as soon as I get on that horse with my great seat, they change their attitude toward me. I know how to sit, I know how I'm dressed properly. I've addressed that horse before I got on it. I'm facing forward, I'm holding the reins properly, my toes are right, I'm not holding the horse with my legs. I got a great seat. The other people arrive. There's a family of 3, father, mother, daughter, about 12-ish, and then a couple. They don't, getting out of the car, they don't look like they know what they're doing. But it's okay, it's all right. I'm in this beautiful day, I'm going to be on a horse, which I love, and it's going to be a great ride, even though I probably won't be galloping or running or even trotting. I'm still happy to be here. We're all mounted. We're all given our position in the line. Now, if you don't know horses, horses are like every other living creature in this world. There is a hierarchy. There's the lead horse, the dominant horse, and then everybody else. Until you get back to the end of the line where there's... They will follow the leader. And they will follow the one that is more dominant, that is in front of them. And so the last horse is the least dominant, and even if the rider doesn't do a thing, that horse will stay in the line. So Kathy gets on, she greets us, she gives us more rules of the road, and we start out. As we're going out of the stable, another group is coming in, and the 2 leaders get together, and Kathy says, okay. They pass us, and she turns around and she says, one of the people in that group lost their sunglasses. If anybody sees them, let me know. So we're riding out maybe 5-6 minutes, and someone says, hey, there's something gleaming in the sand. It's the sunglasses. Kathy says, will you all just stop a minute? Don't let your horses move around. I'll get them. Now, it's a good 15 feet that she mounts away from the sunglasses. I think that's a little odd. Why didn't she go a little closer? Oh, this is why she didn't go a little closer. She gets off her horse, whose name is Buck. My horse is Daisy. Buck is a beautiful buckskin. He's got this black line down his back that ends in a beautiful black tail. My horse is kind of a latte.
A lot?
Light chocolate. You know, a lot of milk. A lot of light chocolate. And she's Daisy. So Kathy gets off Buck. She takes the reins off his neck. She drops the reins. They're still connected, but the reins are now hanging over the horse into the dirt. And she says, stand, in that commanding voice. Now, you've got to be with an animal a while to get this repertoire. The animals are all taught the same commands. Whether they follow them or not depends on you. So she's paid her dues. And I'm impressed. But I also know she's showing off. But I would have done that too if I had that repertoire with the animal. So she walks that 15 feet to get those sunglasses while that horse just stands there. And everybody's going, ooh, wow. And she comes back. She goes to grab his reins and he bolts. Oh. He bolts. Now, usually a horse that's got his freedom out on the trail is going to go back to the barn. But we're all behind him. He bolts forward. He's got a wide open road in front of him. The big concern on her, well, she's got a lot of concerns. One, her horse just got away. Two, will every other horse in the line follow her? And I'm sitting there thinking, this nice ride in the country has just turned into excitement. I kick Daisy and I say, let's go. Oh, no. I'll get it. And off I go. And Kathy's yelling, no, 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 don't, you can't. I didn't hear that. I am chasing Buck down this road. I know she's busy holding the other horses there. And I get up close to him and I go, go, Buck, go. We're at a full run. I am loving it. And that horse, he takes off now. He puts a little more speed on, and he goes around a curve where I can't see him. And Daisy and I get around the curve, and there he is, standing in grass up to his belly, chewing away. I said, you scoundrel. He's not even heaving. He's breathing a little, but he is, you planned this, boy. You planned this back in the barn. And I ride Daisy up to him. Nice and slow. I know this is the dominant horse. I say, Buck, thanks, buddy. It was great, but it's over. Soon as Daisy passes that critical point where he considers his territory, he turns and he bolts again. Out to the road and off. Okay, we'll do it again. I'm having a ball. The horse is running. We go around another curve. There he is, grass up to his belly, chewing away. This time, the breathing's a little bit harder. But this, I've learned. So I know that I cannot approach this horse with the one I'm riding. So I dismount. And I take Daisy over to a bunch of big bushes. I tie her reins tight so I can reach them when I need to. But I also make sure she can't pull me. And I go back to Buck. And I say, okay, Buck, it's over. You had a good time. And I pass the critical point where he has decided this is my space, stay out of it. He takes a step backwards. Okay, Buck, okay, you're a beautiful horse, you're a good boy. I hit that point again, just out of my reach. I know it's back there. So then I see behind him there's bushes. And I'm thinking, that's how I'm going to get him. So I keep doing it. And he keeps taking a step back, and pretty soon that butt is up against the bushes. And he can't go left or right because of the bushes. He's only got to go forward. And I know when he does that, I can grab the rein. And it happens that way. And so now I've got him. You're a good boy. I rub under the halter. I rub his ears. I rub his chin. He's loving it all. So you're a beautiful horse. I'm putting it on thick. It's time to go. Grab the reins, and just as easy as if you were walking your poodle in a show, he follows me back to the road. This little I find a different bush. I tie him up high so I can reach from the back of Daisy. Now, right now, you should be thinking, the title of her story is Mounting a Clever Horse. But you can see that I'm not going to get on Buck. the story is about Daisy. She's going to have her moment. I go over to Daisy. It's an animal that has seen me fixing it up. She wants some attention. So I rub her ears, I rub under the halter, I tell her she's a beautiful girl, and I take my reins, and I stand beside her. Here's her head. I put my foot up to go in the stirrup, and she takes one step to the right. My foot crashes onto the ground, my head bams into the saddle. She's not going to let me mount. Try again. One little step to the right. I cannot get my foot in the stirrup. I look down the road to make sure they're not coming. Because I have in my head this triumphant trot back to the group with my 2 horses and Dale Evans, Roy Rogers, the kid that owned Fury, the kid that owned Flicker, all of these idols from 1950s horse shows. That's me, riding in. Well, they're not there yet. So I'm, and I don't want to get mad. It's in me. It's in me to yell at this horse and to yank those reins. But I know I've lost if I do that. So I give her some more rubs. I give her some more pets. I put my hand under the cinch, give her a little room in there. You gotta let me mount. No way is this horse going to let me get on her back. I am not walking down the road with 2 horses. And then I'm thinking, we backed Buck into the bushes. Maybe it'll work with Daisy. So I take her, I take the reins, I'm in front of her, so I'm pushing the reins back, and I'm saying back. It's another command they learn very young, back, back. So she keeps walking back. She backs right into the bushes. Here's her head. This time I turn the stirrup toward me so that I'm facing her butt, lift my foot, put it in the stirrup. She has to only move forward, and I swing in. And man, am I feeling good. I'm going to get that horse, and I'm going to have my moment of triumph. Shall we trot? Shall we gallop? I go over to the bush, I untie Buck, and I'm ready. Let's go, Daisy. Daisy starts to move, Buck doesn't move. He's got his 2 feet in front of him, and he's not budging. And I am being stretched between the walking horse and the one that don't. This foot comes out of the stirrup. I wish you weren't getting this. I am stretched. I'm looking down at dirt. Whoa, I finally say. Daisy stops. Buck doesn't budge. Come on, Buck. I've got the pommel in my hand, and there's no way he's going to move, and she's whoa. All right. If I take those reins and I pull her, maybe she'll go back. And she does. She backs up. Enough for me to get that leg back in the stirrup, get my beautiful seat back, and look at him. He won't budge. I'm pulling those reins, those feet are planted. And Daisy's just sitting there like, she was snickering. I take the reins and I wrap them around the pommel, and I say, let's go, Daisy. She takes a step, and grudgingly, he has to take a step. But the strap of the reins is right across my leg, pushing it into the saddle. Oh. We walk back all the way, me getting worse, him never stopping the protesting, and Daisy just going. So we don't ride up in triumph, and we're not running, and we're hardly walking, but we finally reach up to the group. And the minute I saw Kathy, you could see the relief over her whole body. We get up close, the people start clapping. I get to Kathy, I hand her horse and her leg. She said, thank you. You never should have done that. I would be in great big trouble if anything happened to you. I'd be in great big trouble if anything happened to me too. But I just handed her the horse. She takes the reins, she takes a deep breath, she looks up to me and she says, "Thank you." You're welcome. She gets up on Buck, she comes over close to me and she says, "You know, it might not be a bad idea if," and I said, "that I don't tell anybody back at the barn." So that was my afternoon of another lesson in horsemanship, and I had two great professors, because it's those hands-on moments that you remember the best, and I was back in the saddle.
Oh, great.